Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. Tomorrow is going to be a big Monday Night Raw, hyping up Extreme Rules 2015. I know that a lot of people are going through the WrestleMania burn, where basically, we got all hyped up for WrestleMania 31, and now you're looking at where the cards are laying now, and there's going to be no Undertaker, there's going to be no Sting, there's going to be no Triple H as a part of Extreme Rules. So, there's going to be no Brock Lesnar as well. So now we're just sort of left with the pieces that are laying there on the table, and they are what they are. It is what the WWE is. So many people became big wrestling fans and believed in WWE again after, hosting an awesome WrestleMania 31. One of the best ones of all time that a lot of reviews and a lot of podcasts were saying that they put it right up there in those top 5 WrestleManias. But, now as we're going along, we're going to go back into that where people are, complaining about what's happening on Monday Night Raw and saying that it's not exciting and, wrestling isn't what it once was. But WWE really cares about that network, and they're looking for all sorts of exclusives to make people sign up and put a big number. So all of the people that invest in their company will continue to investing in their company, and they continue to have that large amounts of income. Honestly, when it comes down to it, when I look at the $9.99 price that I've been paying for, over a year now on the WWE Network, the pay-per-views are well worth the price of admission. Having the, backlog of, video on demand, all of the old pay-per-views, as well as the selected Monday Night Raws, Nitros, SmackDowns, Prime Times. There's enough wrestling out there that, even if I sat down and took a vacation from work and watched wrestling for 24 hours a day for 7 days out of the whole week, I would still have things that I would still be able to flip through and not, be watching the same thing twice over and over again. But the one thing that WWE Network has been really bringing to the table, they've done 2 of these in the past, and they've been real big, huge successes, and that's with Stone Cold Steve Austin hosting the live podcast through Podcast One on the WWE Network. I know that they changed the name, but it's the same podcast that's going to air on Podcast One. If you go over there and you download it through iTunes or you download it through their website, they've always been really big and they've been really exciting. Some stories have come out basically saying that Stone Cold Steve Austin, has side projects, or maybe Vince McMahon is upset with the way that Stone Cold Steve Austin handles the podcast or asks questions that maybe might not have been on a pre-list of questions, sort of telling Triple H and Vince McMahon where the story was going. Vince McMahon, didn't really seem like he was bombarded with questions, but definitely, Triple H, the podcast was a different kind of a conversation. Instead of just hitting one little thing, Stone Cold Steve Austin seemed to be jumping around. He asked for emails, and maybe he was, going off of a list of questions that he was looking at, either on his computer or on his iPad or somewhere off to the side to sort of get through it. If you've been a longtime fan of the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast, you can remember the early days when the podcast was getting off the ground. Man, oh man, they were ugly. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin basically reading his Wikipedia page, reading the person he was interviewing's Wikipedia page and getting them to respond on what was on Wikipedia. And, since then, basically, Stone Cold Steve Austin has taken Wikipedia, balled it up and thrown it in the trash, and now he's basically just, we're going to sit down and we're going to shoot the breeze. And, when an hour is up, we're going to turn the recorder off, and that's going to be the end of the show. If we get to talk about your greatest achievements, you winning championships, it is what it is. If we end up talking about hunting and fishing for the whole hour, hey, we had a good talk, and hopefully the people out there listen. Well, WWE is sort of gone, and they're going in a different direction with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, honestly, is a guy that really gets it done. He understands, what the people want to hear. The dirt that was slung at him from the CM Punk podcast on the Art of Wrestling, where basically CM Punk called him out that he was a guy just going after the hot topics, just trying to get those instant downloads and those instant clicks from people wanting to hear the backstage drama. But he is a guy that knocks out the people, Justin Gabriel, when he was just released from WWE. He got Samoa Joe when he just said that he was going to leave TNA. He's that guy who goes out and gets those fresh people. He's a guy that's inside of the company enough that he's has the connections to get the interviews of the big guests. And he's also a guy that's on the outside, is able to get people from TNA, he's able to get people from Ring of Honor, and he's able to bring these people into the show. And, what's the worst that's going to happen? WWE's not going to put him on their upcoming house show tour when he has some dates free from Fozzy. Honestly, when it comes down to it, the Chris Jericho podcast is a really good podcast. Honestly, there's some days when it's hit and miss with his intro, and there's sometimes when I know I'm going to fast forward the first 30 minutes of the show, and there's sometimes when I'm like, I don't want to sit through another Jericho intro, and then I end up turning on the podcast to see what he's going to talk about, and the 30 minutes goes by in the snap of a finger, and I loved everything that he was saying. So I don't know. Jericho is a very good interviewer. He definitely knows the questions people wants to hear. He, gets down and gets enough dirt without, interviewing the person and, digging into their personal lives and things like that. I think that tomorrow's podcast with John Cena is going to be a really, really big hit. Honestly, WWE is coming right off of WrestleMania 31. There's questions with John Cena and his character. Even he's brought it up on Monday Night Raw in the past, basically saying, how much longer is, John Cena going to be able to do this? He's been on top of the mountain now for 10, going on 11 years since winning the championship at WrestleMania 21 by beating JBL. And from there, just going on to having this huge monster run. I mean, he's been on top of the WWE longer than Hulk Hogan was on top, longer than Stone Cold Steve Austin was top. WWE has been, really, really trying to create the next big star to replace John Cena, knowing that he's not going to be able to sell out and work house shows and main events and bring the people in, for so many years. We've seen in the last year John Cena taking time off from Monday Night Raw, time off from house shows to go out and work outside projects. He's a part of that comedy movie where he's having sex with Amy Schumer, something like that, the chick from Comedy Central, and there's thoughts of people saying that Vince McMahon is upset. This was one of the reasons why Vince McMahon did not re-sign The Rock when his contract came up in 2003, maybe it was 2004. Basically, The Rock went off and made a movie where he played a gay character in the movie Be Cool. It wasn't the kind of way that Vince McMahon wanted The Rock to be, categorized. Yes, it was a movie. Yes, it's not real life, but to Vince McMahon, having his top guy that's supposed to be walking around, talking about what did he call his cock back in the day? Easy big boy, when he was talking with Lillian, he'd rub one out real fast there on the stage. That's the reason why Rock and Vince McMahon, they went their separate ways. They did patch it up at WrestleMania 21. The Rock showed up in LA. He wasn't a part of the show, but he was backstage. Him and Vince had their first talk for a first time in a long time, and they were able to, throw a lot of the things that were said under the bridge, and they were able to patch it up. And it did take Rock a long time to come back. Jericho is a guy that has been in wrestling and out of wrestling, and every time he leaves, everybody's waiting for the next big return of when he's coming back, to the point where people show up at his book signings, people show up at his record signings, at his concerts, and hey Chris, when you coming back to wrestling? And he has a lot of outside interests. He just recently had a book come out in the last year. I believe that came out back in October, Best of the World, at what, I don't know. The only guy in the wrestling business that can have a free book signing that charges you $50 to sign his book. If you watch the Salt and Battery 777's video, when they went to the book signing at the comic store, where they told you to go buy the book, bring it to the store, and pay $50 more to get it signed. But he also has Fozzy, which is a big rock band. His CD, I believe, launched at #1 on the metal charts. He does a lot of concerts all over the world. It seems like he's a bigger star when he goes outside of the United States more than he is inside the United States. But it is what it is. He'll always be Chris Jericho to me. Whatever outside interest he has, once he gets into the ring, he's one of the best wrestlers that I've ever seen. Really good promos, really good at wrestling, and he's one of the best topics that I'm hoping hoping that they cover would be, Chris Jericho and John Cena having a match. I believe it was Vengeance 2002, way back in John Cena's rookie year inside of the WWE. Maybe talking about how much John has, grown up and become a better wrestler in those days, or maybe even bringing up the fact that John Cena used to be a good wrestler that doesn't wrestle anymore. He seems to be a guy that when he wrestles on house show relies just on street matches or table matches. You don't really see him get in there and really wrestle. And I'm really thinking that WWE is getting into this new sort of era, I guess you can say. It's not the best word to use it, but basically, with Triple H sort of, moving in and taking over that spot for Vince McMahon someday, and maybe he has gotten a little bit of more control. You can see with WrestleMania weekend, WWE really networking with other people to make WrestleMania even a bigger, more, bigger sort of, just event. When have we ever seen, Sports Center cover the live WrestleMania? I haven't seen WrestleMania or even wrestling results on SportsCenter since the days when WCW used to use Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, Jay Leno, those real big celebrity moments that WCW was chasing when they put the title on David Arquette. Those are the things that got on SportsCenter that nobody really went and viewed what was going on in WCW. That was all they needed to know was, hey, Karl Malone wrestled last night at the Bash at the Beach, or Jay Leno was on Hog Wild, last night, and they got to see the finish. So it didn't really lead to anybody, tuning into Nitro to see what the hell's going on with WCW. Didn't really lead to anybody going out and buying a pay-per-view, renting a VHS tape, buying the VHS tape. No money was coming in. But, people seeing WrestleMania 31 on SportsCenter, seeing Daniel Bryan winning the Intercontinental Championship, seeing John Cena winning the United States Championship, trying to have to explain what the hell Seth Rollins, a guy that wasn't even involved in the main event, winning the championship by cashing in the Money in the Bank. I think that stuff really made people tune into Monday Night Raw the next night. People said that the rating was one of the best ratings that Monday Night Raw has tuned in years. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be tuning in and seeing the results of what happened at WrestleMania. Even though that WrestleMania was only $10 on the WWE Network, there's a lot of people out there that don't pony up for the money or don't know how to stream a show and don't know how to go to WWE.com and really are just watching Monday Night Raw to see what the results of WrestleMania were. There's people out there like that. There's not many of them that watch YouTube videos like this one, but there are. But Jericho and John Cena, you could talk about the Nexus angle of 2010. I believe, it was a long string of matches when Eric Bischoff was trying to get the championship off of John Cena when Vince McMahon was ordering it. And it seemed that Chris Jericho was the guy that Bischoff was pushing to go after John Cena, and he wasn't able to get the job done, which led to Eric Bischoff having to fire John Cena, which led to him leaving the wrestling business for what seemed like forever. I think Jericho was gone for at least 2 years before there were injuries to John Cena, which forced Chris Jericho to make his big return, which he ended up becoming one of the smartest men in wrestling in my mind, with Jericho basically sitting out on the sideline because he knew that WWE was going to lowball him an offer, so he went out and explored other interests, trying to make himself a better name. He hosted TV shows, was on reality TV shows. He started up he had already started up his band. He'd had that since like 99, 2000, and just really started pushing it even more, trying to make it a bigger name. And finally, there was a hole in the roster. They didn't have anybody to main event, and they needed to go out and get a name. Chris Jericho was the biggest name that was on the sideline, and instead of signing a lowballed offer to keep him on the roster, he left and basically got a contract when they needed him more than he needed them, and WWE had to pay for him, and he became one of the most featured guys on the roster. If you can think about the brand split, if you go back to 2009, 2010, Chris Jericho was one of the guys that was really transcending the brands. But he was a singles wrestler on SmackDown, and then he would appear on Monday Night Raw as well, teaming up with the Big Show, going after the tag team champions. But tomorrow's going to be a good show. The only thing I have to say about Jericho, I've heard his deal is that he's going to be hosting 4 of these specials, one each of the next months for the next 4 months, is that, he's really interviewed almost everybody in the WWE roster, especially the big names. He's had Triple H, he's had the Usos, he's had Daniel Bryan, Wade Barrett, The Miz, Damian Sandow. Has he blown through these names? Are they going to be doing reruns just because of the fact it's going to be featured on the WWE Network? And hopefully he can get good material out of these guys. But it's going to be a good one. Tomorrow night after Monday Night Raw, make sure you tune in. Talk is Jericho on the WWE Network live. Exclusive. For a day before they upload it onto the Podcast One sites.